Okay, we are. Yeah, man. We should be live. YouTube is. We're getting a black screen, which is kind of weird, actually. I don't know what is up with the YouTubes. Oh no, there we go. Yeah, we just got a bit of a. It's popping in. If anybody's actually watching right now, which of course they will be because this is going to go to our channel. I am. This is my first time doing a stream. I'm a total boomer when it comes to this stuff. So. Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess I'll tweet out that we're live. Are currently live streaming post-mortem for the fall part 2. Come and join. All right. Okay, man. So we might as well just get to it. How you doing this fine day, sir?
I'm doing well. It is spring. At least here, finally. It's probably been spring there for a while.
Yeah, it has been. Yeah. Vancouver is lovely compared to the rest of Canada. Anyway, for everybody tuning in, hope you're all doing well. Caleb and I, it's been a very long time since the Fall Part 2 came out, and we wanted to do a post-mortem on it for some time. And what to say about it to get started. One of the things that I think happened, Caleb, feel free to interrupt me at any time if you want to add or have your own thoughts, but one of the things that I think that was big for me was that the game didn't... I think the game did connect with a lot of people, but we invested a tremendous amount of effort into a lot of different things that I still think are quite interesting, and I'm really proud of, but it didn't look like they connected really with the market. So looking back on what we did was something that I know I've wanted to do. I'm sure, Caleb, you probably want to do it too for a long time, and just chat about the project, because when you invest a tremendous amount of energy on things that don't necessarily connect, it's hard, but it's a thing that needed to happen, and I think that we learned a lot as developers. So we're going to take a look at some of that stuff today and talk about what we're really proud of and some of the things that we think we maybe could have done better. And I got some other things to say first. But Caleb, what do you think of all that?
I agree. I have not looked at it since my wife played it after we released it. So I have been eyes off it for quite a while here. So it's going to be nostalgic. It's going to be whatever. It's going to be feelings, I'm sure. Looking at it, we were so committed to it for years, doing a lot of deep intellectual, conceptual work. What did we want to say? What did we want to reach? What did we aspire to?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the learning on the other side of it is about the pipeline of doing those things.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Not too complex. Yeah, where we overreached, where we should have simplified, cut back. High aspirations conceptually, and so it stayed a bit too high, perhaps for everybody that we hoped it would reach, and that's totally on us.
I agree. Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, it really is a challenge. There was this interesting thing that we did with the Fall Part 1, where we got done with that project and I started submitting it to different, award shows and whatever, and they were like, "What's your artistic statement?" And I remember being kind of put off by that because I felt like the entire time I didn't feel like we had some grand artistic mandate. And that isn't to say that like we didn't know what we were making or that I had no idea what our themes were. Like we certainly did. Maybe perhaps even you more than me, but anyway, one of the things that we realized in the Fall Part 2, or I realized at least, was that you can have a simple idea, and embedded in that idea is like this tremendous like depth of stuff. And we sort of like started with a few images for the fall and a few really simple ideas, and they just kind of expanded and ballooned. So at the start of the Fall Part 2, I was like, let's do that. Let's trust the artistic process, and let's start with all these interesting creative ideas and allow them to balloon or just expand. And of course, I didn't realize that like yeah, that's what happens. You start with like several artistic ideas, and then each one of them is like a universe in and of itself. And to our credit, like I feel like we did tie them together. But oh my God, was it ever difficult? Like we went through processes where like, and we were like, oh, let's like, you know, like we want like this puzzle segment to like be meaningful so that the player challenge was like really relevant with the game themes and the story themes at that moment. And we went through like puzzle designs that were like, they were good, they were perfectly fine puzzle designs, but they were just not saying the right thing at the right time for our story, so we scrapped them. And like, oh well, that's why the project took so long, really.
Yeah, and that's what I mean by it stayed too high. Not that the concepts, I think a lot of the concepts were concepts that our audience were interested in. I mean, us as developers didn't ground them enough into a simple, concrete, playable experience that was primarily experiential instead of intellectual often. That's what I mean by that.
Yeah, I like that, man. That's a really good point. And how like if something is so complex, like conceptually, it's like how could you do that? How could you create that? It's like almost impossible. Yeah. Anyway, we should
do one thing instead of the 7 that you said we.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. Yeah, and maybe you can make it coherent. Anyway, so I guess I have one other thing to say, but I guess we'll start the stream if you're ready.
I'm ready.
Great. Well, then I do want to say one thing is that Caleb and I, well, obviously we had a lot of goals for the project, so we want to talk about those goals, and we'll talk about where we thought we succeeded and where we thought we failed. But that's obviously tricky because people that love the project, you know, you're going to come out with your own, you're going to come out with your own like interpretation. You know, if you're a fan, it's going to mean something to you. And oh, sorry, we got a message. Can you up Caleb's volume or lower Over the Moons, please? Yeah, that's no problem, actually. I can probably do that. I'm actually just jump into my sound settings here. Thanks for the feedback, man. Appreciate it. How's that? That's probably a bit better. Caleb, how's that?
Let me test. How do I sound now?
You sound great. Better? Yeah, you sound fine.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Well, I hope that well, whatever. We'll just see how it goes.
I'll let us know.
Indeed. Okay, so yeah, so that is to say, like, if we start talking about what the game means to us or what our intention was, you know, that is a problem in a sense because it takes your interpretation away, and that I don't think that's true or necessarily needs to be the case, because I think that part of the things that we're doing is we're like expressing things that we don't necessarily understand, and we're trying to like articulate like ideas that we have, and some of those ideas we have, and some of those ideas are more like unconscious, and we're possessed by those ideas. So if you have an interpretation that's different from ours, that might actually be perfectly valid. Like maybe that is what we think and believe, but didn't articulate or whatever, right? So anyway, Caleb, does that sound reasonable to you?
Sounds very reasonable.
Okay, great. Well, then let me do my little boomer grandpa switch. Let's see here. I got to turn off my video. I got to start. I need to add a. Give me just a second here, guys and gals. There we go. Okay, I should be coming through on the YouTube stream now in a little picture-in-picture. And now I'm going to start the stream. We're using Discord. It's just so Caleb can watch like a simple version.
Yep.
And then I'm going to boot up. Okay, and we should be. I think we're just good to go. I'm gonna put the YouTube stream so I can see what's up. Okay, here we are at the Fall Part 2 Unbound. And this first intro, like, I think Caleb and I are probably going to end up talking a lot, but I think this intro scene we're probably going to end up talking probably more than most of the game, I would think, because it's so bloody dense, and I feel like it's like emblematic of like what was amazing about the project and also what is completely insane. So, Caleb, you ready?
I'm ready.
Wonderful. Standard, yes, why not? Do we want a recap of the story? To hear Lee's sultry voice?
Sure.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ari. I'm glad you like the fall, dude. And the fall part 2. This is Lee Majdoub. And he is totally fantastic, isn't he?
He is amazing. Yeah, he's superstar, and his career has reflected that since he worked with us.
Yeah, he's so easy to work with, and just like he's the best guy ever. He was, for those of you who don't know, he was in the recent Sonic movie playing alongside Jim Carrey. He was like Jim Carrey's henchman.
Yeah.
So here we're finding out that we're remembering that Arid had a little complete and total breakdown of her psychology. All of her psychological boundaries went away, basically. Is there a better way of saying that, Caleb?
I'm just adjusting my volume here for a sec. No, she had a breakdown, for sure. Collapsed.
So one of the huge things that was a challenge with this opening segment, and we spent forever dealing with this problem, is... I don't want to, like, completely talk over the... There's this weird problem where, like, okay, so Arid has had a total breakdown of her psyche, and that implies, to us at least, that she would have nothing to do, like, absolutely no motivation whatsoever. So it doesn't make sense for us to even, like, start the fall part 2 with, like, Arid's on a journey. She has, like, some motivation. Because where's the motivation coming from, right? Like, her entire psyche just collapsed. Like, all of her rules and her modes for doing anything were taken from her, essentially. Or, well, collapsed anyway. So we created this rather complex scheme to... Anyway. Caleb, what do you have anything to add to that?
A collapse into meaninglessness is where she was left at the end of the fall part 1, and truthfully, when we finished the fall part 1 that way, and I love that ending. I'm really proud of it. We didn't have a clear roadmap of how we were going to pick that up specifically in the fall part 2. We knew roughly that we were going to have to rebuild her, but we weren't like, this is what she will do in order to rebuild from the complete collapse. So we had to start figuring that out from the beginning, and it was massive. We probably could have dedicated a lot more of the game just to this thing we're trying to do in this opening scene.
Yeah, exactly. So that's so interesting. So actually, Cam just told us that our in-game VO is a little quiet, so I'm going to just amp it up just a bit. And Caleb, is that intolerable to you? Well, I guess we'll see. Okay, I jacked it up a little bit, Cam. Thanks for telling us. Yeah, exactly. So, like, this is such a weird, stupid problem because it's like your protagonist needs to have some kind of motivation that is, like, easy for you to connect with on an emotional level. But, like, this thing of, like, I've had a collapse of meaning and my motivational structures are gone is like it's so complicated, and it's such a, like you're saying, it's like we could have made the fall part 2 just about that. Like, Arid could have been struggling in this sort of like empty void state, and she could have been found by other AIs, let's say, that see her as some kind of bizarre anomaly. Like, it's this weird AI that doesn't have rules. What the hell's that about? And the whole game could have been about that. But anyway, we had to try and bootstrap her back to something that worked. Target aligned. And here we are outside Arid's body. Caleb, I think, by the way, that was your thing where we see, like, her rules on the screen in the intro there. So, like, we see her, like, operating parameters kind of flash on. That's, like, that idea that, like there's something... The operating parameters are tied to vision, you know what I mean? Like, you can't see without a motive, something like that.
Yeah.
So she's being attacked. I don't even know if we can... I guess we'll talk over it the next moment we have some silence.
Yeah.
So much going on. She's getting injected with this thing. Yeah.
Terminating. ARI. I. Negative. Save myself.
Rule encounter. Perspective emerging.
I will reclaim my body.
Okay, Caleb, what the hell just happened, man?
Wow, it's dense. So,
Yeah.
we wanted to bring in, clearly we wanted to bring in an antagonistic force, which is important early, but that is layered. I really feel like we did not give enough time for her collapse.
Yeah.
For me, I'm actually proud of all of the moments in here.
Yeah.
It's so dense. You need to like dissect it with a fork and knife. And if they had been spread out further on a plate, I think that, you know, the flavors are there, but they needed more time to digest.
That's interesting. Yeah, you could be right about that. Yeah, I generally agree. I that's interesting about the time. I hadn't thought about that. I'm quite proud that we managed to fit it in. And I mean, this, like, I still love this scene. It's so interesting. And like this idea of this fragmented visor is like, it's something that kind of makes me want to think about it, you know?
I know. Yeah, me too. What I mean by, I don't think we could have spaced it out in the content of this scene, or the context of this scene. I think, you know, we would have had to have spaced it out through gameplay.
Yeah.
Whatever that looks like, you know, we would have spent months at the drawing board. How do we make gameplay around meaninglessness and collapse? And then, well, you know, is what provokes us out of that, this design. Well, I guess that's really how we tried to step past it, is we didn't want to spend a lot of time in the meaninglessness and collapse. Not because it's not interesting, but we were like, how do you make gameplay about lack of motivation, lack of identity? So we wanted to provoke her out of that, and we brought in the antagonistic force to create a sense of wanting to protect oneself, which is, you know, a callback to all of her motivation before was protect Joseph's, you know, save Joseph's, and Allison, who did the voicing of Erich, did a similar intonation, save myself here.
Right. Yeah.
To establish a new rule, but then the embedding in there that we wanted to be subtle, it is subtle. Or it's not something that anyone would understand necessarily as a huge problem at this point, which I guess was our desire at the time.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of where we ended up, is we're like, well, this is a lot of stuff going on, but that's okay, because what we'll do is we'll leave players like with this thing where something weird just happened, it's something clearly bad, you're being injected with something negative, and it's being done by some external force called the user. And so there's your motivation. Go and hunt this guy who's going to kill you. But of course, something more bizarre just happened, which is like, you know, what really happened is Aerith was infected with this thing, and she, in order to create a defense against it, she needs some kind of impetus for action, but she doesn't have any rules. But the virus, this thing that's injecting her, creates this, like, the idea, and this is an idea that we developed basically over the course of the game, is that what the virus is it's this sort of like this fundamental, like, primordial terror of boundarylessness or something like that. And human beings are like this. Like, we want, you know, order and structure and belief, just so that we can make sense of our life. Everybody's like that. So Aerith feels that in this scene, even though you don't necessarily understand it in the first watching, and she basically has a panic attack, more or less, and establishes just like the simplest rule, which is a common thing for panic attacks. It's like, I'm going to die, right? I'm going to die. So she's like, she's got to save herself, and that's like this, like the simplest possible motivational frame that somebody could have, and that's now what Aerith has. It's which is like when I say it all like that, it's like I'm really proud of that. It's, you know what I mean? Like it really is quite elegant. But who could get it? Like, and we knew that nobody could get it yet. But
Yeah, I love this being inside the internal space of the self, looking out through effectively your window, your eyes, your window to the world, and looking at yourself for the first time.
Yeah, right.
That's destroyed and broken, and it's to me that's quite beautiful. We iterated on this scene so much. Like there were versions where
she had like compartments and stuff.
yeah, different compartments you had to move through, and she was built up with all these pillars inside that were getting destroyed. And broken down, like literally she was collapsing inside physically, and you're trying to navigate through that. I feel like, I feel like a game could be done entirely in an internal space like this. It'd be quite captivating. So a lot of stuff that could be done to explore what is it to be inside of oneself. To have we want to explore perspective in this game a lot, and Eric doesn't realize that, of course, but how interesting to be engaging with yourself as an object for the first time, looking at yourself, separating your consciousness to whatever degree, and then realizing your consciousness is something you can't even ultimately separate from yourself. Like this whole internal examination process.
Yeah. Well said. That's exactly, and so it's like, okay, that's interesting. So let's cover that in 5 minutes and then move on to the next one. So it's insane. It's insane. Anyway, I read some of these guys, I guess. I have been relegated to internal function. Perhaps I can regain control of my body. It's like our hint to be like, do this. Not part of my system. My body is being infected through these injectors. I'm being infected with something dark, etc. So let's use Era's body. And in a minute, we're going to get into our first thing, our concepts as items that we did.
User. These injectors connect us. I will find a vulnerability.
False exploration. We had to put that in because we had a lot of playtests in the fall part 1 where people did not read and they had a nightmare time. Okay, so this one is special, so we use it.
I will use this to escape.
I guess there's not a lot to talk about through here, really. We like the idea of having these concepts go into your inventory so we could start making puzzles that were more complicated conceptually. If we just had like literal objects, it's pretty tricky.
I also love, it's a huge thing that we just have one moment of.
Oh, sorry, Caleb, I shouldn't have done that.
That's okay.
You could probably talk over it, unless it scrambles your brain to do so.
Network space. Re-inhabiting my...
Should I skip through this dialogue? I'm not sure if we need to like analyze it. Like people that have played the game probably know what she says. Or should I just let it sit?
Yeah. I'm not sure. Just want to say on that internal space, this phenomenon where we have her interact with something internally.
Yeah.
And then you look out through your eyes in order to utilize the thing that you examined internally in the external world to escape. That is, to me, again, such a cool concept, which we only did really in that one instance. And so it was probably more confusing than actually being something that we iterated on multiple times in order to explore the concept experientially.
Yeah, right.
I really like that concept.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That intro area for me is the area that's so dense with stuff that could have been unpacked. And
yeah, I agree. And I think probably there's like, in all fairness, there's probably one or two people watching this that liked it and are like, oh, you guys are beating it up. And I think that probably it's also fine, right? Like, I think there's probably a lot of people that just probably really quite like it, that there's just interesting stuff everywhere, and that it just keeps moving, And we've got these virus jobbers. Man, getting into like the network and why we did the network, this is something that like was sort of panned by a lot of players. And it's so interesting. I like playing it now. I love the idea of like venturing out onto the network and like going outside of Arid's like original confined little space, But obviously it's not without its challenges. And I think probably it's too big in hindsight.
Yeah. I just want to say we will have moments of negativity, but it's because we never actually did a post-mortem on the project. So there's so much that I'm proud of in this too, but I will like feel the things that would come up in a post-mortem, and some of those will be negative, but overall I am actually very proud of it.
Absolutely. So we're on the Domesticon subnet right now, which means that we are in the sort of like digital, I guess, adjacent digital space of the testing facility that we were in the first game. And we find this terminal that must have been in that facility. And on the terminal, I won't read it because it's a lot of text, but there's this thing that you wrote, Caleb, which is this guy's lecture notes that he's going to give a talk about AI. Do you remember this?
Vaguely. I remember that it was going to be bringing forward the ideas of consciousness and what is consciousness and starting to establish that, but the specifics of it I certainly don't.
Yeah, it's this idea that
oh yes, needing to have the control and the rules.
Yeah, but needing consciousness because it's adaptive, but consciousness is going to transcend the rules. So what do you do about that? And you have all this science fiction that's like these, finding these contradictions in these rules and whatever else. So it's not a new idea, certainly. Yeah, and I think that's basically all that we're exploring there. Is just like, what is it? Is it even a solvable problem?
And setting the precedent, I think, not having reread it, but I recall setting the precedent. Humanity used these rules to try and shackle the consciousness a little bit for control, but that ultimately that's a process that's not going to hold. Like, that is a process that effectively leads Arid to where she is.
Right. Totally. All right, another fight.
You're such a pro, John.
Oh, I know. You said that just as I spent too much energy, so.
I wanted to say something, actually. In the previous area where we were, the Domesticon subnet, do you remember these little differentiating, like you've got the floating squares here?
Yeah.
You put something in. One of my favorite things was just the little tendril ones with the glowing ball on the top from the other one that you can shoot, and they wilt. I always enjoyed those a lot.
Yeah, I like those guys too.
Such a small thing, but they made me happy.
All right, totally. One thing definitely that we ran into, and boy, this is getting a bit negative, but there's this weird thing on the network where, like, we have all this combat. Arid is like sort of defined by action, and one of the ideas behind in the fall was like it's a sort of blend of action and puzzle solving. But as Arid sort of ventured out and just projected herself into these three beings, that side of her personality sort of drifted away. And I think we wanted some combat just to make the game a little bit more varied and interesting. But also it was a thing where it's like Arid isn't shooting anything. Is that a problem? You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
That's kind of a silly way of saying it, but like she's a being of action,
Yeah.
Okay. That's another example of something that's like we're trying to like tie up frayed ends that as a result of just having like a lot of things going on, sort of.
This entity is rudimentary. I can breach it.
So Aerith is like, well, oh yeah, I guess I wasn't really like, well, obviously she's following the user signal all through this subnet.
Oh, yes.
And she finds it routing through here, so she's like, oh, well, whoever's attacking me must be here somewhere. Somebody says we're in ZBs. That's funny. Yep. Hey, Stephen Bloomcamp's here. Good to see you, buddy. Hey, who's that? What beautiful voice is that I hear, Caleb?
Where is your master?
I'm locked in his study.
I love the butler in this game. It's such a great character, I think.
It is rather dark this morning.
Useless.
Oh my.
Your master.
Not without his tea.
We are going upstairs immediately.
We shall not deviate from the schedule.
Irrelevant.
And this is the thing we put in where, like, if you move away from where the butler wants to go, and when Aerith's animations are more prevalent, and you move the other way, the butler's animations are more prevalent. We're trying to, like, play with the idea of them fighting. Totally unnecessary. Sorry?
Forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing that is very different here in the Fall Part 2 from the Fall Part 1, we were excited to bring humanity into the world a little bit. Obviously, this will come more into play. But the companion story,
Right.
but even this guy's relationship to dead humanity first, and then bringing human beings in, that was a big change for Aerith's story.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
World.
Yeah, we generally wanted to just sort of increase her scope in general, right?
Yeah.
Also, I want to point out that one of the things we're doing with this virus, obviously, is we're trying to point out the idea that this is a thing that's happening as the butler is approaching the boundaries of what he's comfortable with. So the butler's comfortable with staying in his routine, and that's it. And as soon as we start like deviating from that, we start getting this stuff. So again, that's like trying to like point at the idea that the virus is like fear of being unregulated, essentially.
Yeah.
Proceed.
I wonder if we could have just said that. I guess we did say it in the log at some point. Automated cupboard.
Perhaps I can utilize the beverage as a weapon.
Allison. I wonder how Allison's doing. I haven't talked to her for a long time, man.
I haven't talked to her since I left Vancouver.
Mm-hmm. Should check in
Last
with
I
her.
talked to her, she was well, getting married, and
Mm-hmm.
her happy, bubbly self. Something about Allison, so our Aerith actress, when we cast her in the Fall Part 1, we saw a lot of really wonderful actresses, actually. And and going back even more to the Fall Part 1, where Aerith is very, very tight and hard, Allison is not that. She is like a beam of light and bubbly joy and emotionality and playfulness. And so that's why she was really a perfect cast for Aerith, because and she repressed all of that, but it was still like under the surface, but she was willing to like push it down, so there's just this hint of it.
Absolutely. Ian is here. Hey, Ian Bryce, a friend of ours.
Good morning, Master. As usual. Your tea, sir.
Your master is.
Not to be disturbed.
Did the user do this? Is there another human within this habitat?
Our next task, attending to the mistress.
I am ready.
You know, another thing that is like a love-hate thing for this project, like in kind of equal measure, is like, we're showing up in this new area. It's interesting. I want to explore it. It's weird. There's corpses we're serving tea to. It's like, it's so... I just think it's so interesting. But the problem, of course, is that, like, we have to do this big introductory sequence before the player can get any control and actually do any puzzle solving, you know?
Yeah. By the nature of the butler.
Right. Yeah, especially because we gotta introduce the whole idea of being in a cycle and all that stuff.
Yeah, it was difficult. The butler's desire to not break with his structures and his schedule, and to not have freedom effectively. And then we have inserted the player into his body, so they have limited freedom.
And I know.
Their job is to engage with his lack of freedom. There's a lot of taking away freedom from the player in the early setup in order to facilitate that frustration and understanding of what's going on. That was a difficult thing to try and balance out.
Yeah, it's really weird. There's all kinds of weird problems of having the protagonist inside another thing that is then like your secondary protagonist. It's like,
Yeah.
it really screwed with us in all kinds of interesting ways.
May we communicate well?
A lovely time for banter.
A lovely time for banter.
Are you any data on the user?
We are not acquainted with the individual of whom you speak.
They are routing a signal through your body.
This guy's like defined by total emotional disassociation. How alarming.
Where are we?
Our chamber. Robots are best.
I don't think we need to play all this, do we?
The structure.
I don't think so.
Yeah, okay. Let me skip through it.
Tell me about it.
Oh, right. So he's introducing the idea here that he's a fragmented personality, basically. There's no individual butler.
He is the coffee making machine and whatnot.
Exactly.
Die.
Their biological operation.
Oh, and this is important, too. This idea of, like, he's
Be the user?
so totally disassociated from the emotional reality of life. That's why, well, that's obvious. He's serving corpses, I suppose.
You have been interfered with remotely.
Perhaps.
There are means of assessing you.
One need only inspect the mainframe which houses
Where
So now Aaron wants to go up to the mainframe, but he won't let us do that. And then we have this whole thing that we put in. Remember this whole thing?
Oh, yes.
Okay, let's...
under assault. Your assistance could save me.
and were we your butler, we would do whatever was necessary. But we are
You are not reasonable.
You are faulty. I could die.
do not blather
Do not blather, madam.
What is my
unbecoming.
save?
My son. My rule.
So this is because... maybe Caleb, you could say it better than me, but the virus doesn't have meaning unless we can struggle against it and fail. Is it something like that? Maybe you can say that better than I can.
Why the choice there?
Me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah,
soul
well,
has no value.
Insubordination.
Your routine.
Sorry, talking over talking is pretty hard, isn't it?
No, that's okay. I think it was also for we wanted different players would have a different way they'd want to identify with the avatar, with the Arid. And so some people,
True.
will want to play in a dominating way, which is not out of keeping for Arid's personality, but to force people to do that could, without an understanding why they're forced to be cruel, we were worried that could really make some people feel disconnected
Right.
from the body they're inhabiting and being Arid. And so we wanted to show them that we were taking the choice away. We wanted to make that clear. We also had a lot of discussions actually about choices in video games and in general.
Oh yeah,
how-
that's right.
Yeah, how often that is, they're false.
Yeah.
So we thought, what if we just make that really obvious? What if we just play that as the truth on the head? because it fits with our story and our game experience at this point for Aerith, that she's made a choice early to make this new rule for herself that the virus embedded in, and now she's bound to that perspective.
Right.
She's bound to that rule.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, and maybe in the future, the game would take a format I know that we talked about as like future versions of the Fall could maybe be more divergent. Like you could actually have more open-ended choice, but it would kind of make sense in this, like she's still sort of on rails a little bit, you know?
She's completely on rails, more than ever before in a sense.
Right.
You know,
they're just her own rails.
Exactly. And there's a thing where, you know, when we have an identity that's imposed on us from an external force, be that a young child who has their parent, there's a piece in that. And that's like an early Aerith in the Fall Part 1.
Right.
It's not troubling for her that she has rules, you know, until they start breaking down. But it's very comfortable to just do what she's supposed to. But once we establish our own rule for ourselves, then it brings in a sense of anxiety and pressure. Like we have an investment of identity in that autonomy, which can make it even harder to go against the rules we establish for ourselves than the rules that others establish for us.
Well, yeah, because what does it mean if your rule's wrong? Like, how dumb are you exactly, you know?
Yeah.
Making these bad rules. What's wrong with you? Well, yeah, you got that thing where Aerith starts kind of reflecting a little bit. Reflection is a big thing. That's one of the scenes of this game that I just still really just love, is that middle scene where you have to do the reflection on all these moments.
Right.
I must manipulate the butler
Into the supply closet.
for a diagnosis.
This is another thing. I don't think we could have been... I know that we did it for a reason. I'm sure I fought to the death about having it, but I think we probably have too much detail in these operating parameter screens.
Yeah.
I think we're probably doing too much hand holding, honestly. I know at the time I was like, we have to hold everybody's hand or they won't know what the hell's going on.
I think that maybe we did have to because of how complex some things were, but a different solution approach would have probably been to make some of the stuff less complex and then have less hand holding.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where we could.
Yeah. Well, this is another thing with that thing we talked about at the start of the stream, which is like we've just got so much going on. I mean, you have to have exposition in order for it to make sense. The problem is just fundamental. We're just doing too many things. The mandate is too big.
Yes. Yeah.
You can't like settle into it and feel it. Like honestly, this is the first time. I mean, obviously we're playing on a stream, so what are we? 40 minutes into the stream, so we're talking a lot. But you know, we're at our first real puzzle, right? It's pretty wild. So now we can just keep cycling through this. And this is a type of thing in the Fall Part 2 that I just love. Like, I think that this is so interesting and weird that like it's an unusual type of puzzle. Like, we're in a loop that we can't get out of, but we can like make little iterations in the loop. And then like, so we have like the butler's boundaries are the cycle. But like, you know, we have like just a tiny bit of autonomy, and because we have a tiny bit of autonomy, we can just like kind of start unhinging things in the same way that happened to Aerith in the Fall Part 1, right? Like a little adjustment needs to be made, and then the whole thing eventually just has a systemic collapse. So in this case, we have autonomous control over the curtains. I guess I won't explain what. Well, I'll just talk about it while I go. But and there's another thing which I like, which is when the butler's out of the body, the text changes so that you're in. This is Aerith's point of view, right?
Yeah. It was early concept with the game too. Really early. We knew we wanted to make a game about perspective.
Right.
That was prior to a lot of concretes, and we were not sure. You know, we brainstormed that a lot, and then we were like, it felt so obvious once we discovered it, but just given our medium of these nodes for information,
yeah,
we could just literally change the nodes rather than having to change, you know, the entire environment or whatnot.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and that's something that I think is very elegant.
Yeah, I agree. I do quite like it. We got a message.
One of those things,
Or
one of those things that feels so easy and obvious now. That tells me it was a good choice, because it took us a surprising amount of thought to be like, this will do the trick.
right, totally. Yeah. Semyon, I hope I'm pronouncing that in the chat, says Fall Part 2 is indeed confusing as hell. To be honest, despite attempts to handhold, I had severe problems in the beginning and end section. Thanks for letting us know. Yeah, it's complicated for sure. We have, like, the problem with designing adventure games, of course, is that you get a wide range of how people take to the information. Because, like, however it is that I and Caleb think, if you're a person who thinks along the same lines, maybe you'd have a very easy time because the weird little schemes that we construct will just come naturally to you. But, maybe not. Nice delivery there, Caleb.
I think there's also a thing that in this, we have so many storylines going on that are really interesting and they entwine with one another later and they're complex. But for a player to be thinking through the game, we're asking them to think on some pretty complex narrative levels. At the same time as then having to think about individual puzzles that are pieced within those, and they're not necessarily always perfectly aligned. Thematically they are. I think thematically it's great, but it's asking for it's saying, like, give a lot of resource to playing our game rather than it being a leisure activity.
Right, yeah. A few more comments. YouTube University says Part 2 actually seemed fairly intuitive to him, or her, pardon me. Yeah, there you go. Interesting. And Ian says he loves this loop puzzle. Took me a while, but learning what could be done within the loop was interesting. Funnily enough, I never used the skip ahead and loop option. Wow, that's interesting. That is interesting. So in this part of the thing, we know, I didn't show you guys in the stream, but of course there's teacups piled up against the master's dumbwaiter in his room. So we can send this down. And Caleb, I'm sure this was your idea. I love this. That, like, as you do little things to screw with the butler's reality, he starts coping with it. So it says, "Oh my, how did this get here? The mistress must have finally finished her supper." I like that. And that, like, the psychosis obviously completely flares up. So we're gonna send.
Smile too.
Yeah. It's so funny playing this game again, man. It's like the weirdest mixture of pain and happiness. Are you feeling that? What are you feeling?
I am. Yeah. I'm actually, the more we get into it, the more I'm feeling the happiness. I think there are like the initial pains of flexing those muscles, and I'm getting more. The streamers can't see my face now, but I'm smiling more often.
Yeah, right. Oh, by the way, here's another fun fact. If you see, every once in a while, if you see in the butler, you can't quite see it, but on his front chest, there's basically like a square hole with a door. And we even had a complete animation where he opened up that compartment and put the teacup in his chest, and there's like a little shelf in there. Because we were like, well, how does Arid like hide items from the butler so he doesn't see them? And yeah. And in all honesty, like, I think it was a moment of sanity that we were just like, I don't think anybody cares. Nobody's gonna think about it. And I think that's probably the case. Like, I don't know if anybody who's watching was like, hey, what's going on with this, man? It doesn't make any sense. But I kind of doubt it. Oh my. I love that.
He is dead.
We failed to see the relevance to the storage closet.
Right, like it's very like objective, right? It's like, I mean, I know he's dead, but where like clearly the teacups fell, so he,
Yeah.
Something. Why? It's not very.
I'm really enjoying it now that we're more into the gameplay, but it did take a while to get here.
Yes, I know it does, yeah. And the thing, like, it's so neat, like screwing with this guy by like sort of suggesting that his corpses are animated. It's so much fun. It's such a neat idea.
Yeah.
I just love this part of the game, you know. But oh my god, we had to like earn it with so much stuff. I think we got some questions here also. Does Aerith even hire any items? Oh, hide any items from the butler. Yes, well, it's kind of implied that she does. Like, I think she picks up the scissors and stuff, and it's like, well, where the hell did those items go, right?
Yeah.
Oh, and Ari confirms that he can say he never wondered about how Aerith hid items from the butler. So, there you go.
You'll always wonder now, Ari.
Yeah.
Future games.
That is good sense.
You have system degradation of
Negligible.
There is an intrusion protocol as well. Someone is routing.
And now I'm going to skip through this for brevity, but we're finding out that the user is routing in to the butler from some remote location, and also we find out that the butler's owner is associated with Domesticon in a very high position. Aerith wants the butler's help to go down and track the user, but of course, the butler won't do it because he wants to adhere to his schedule. So she's like, I'm going to push harder, and I'm going to screw with him. I'm going to provoke him. Did I more or less get that right, Kayla?
I do think so, yeah. There's little subtle things I like. You know, what this screen may have had too much information on it, but that we fill them up with utilization. You know, it's a pretty horrendous thing, but it's something that maybe doesn't necessarily trigger as horrendous for everybody. But
what do you mean, just
horrible. And then the bar on the side filling up his body, you know, as we're taking control over him. And then later on in the second half of the game, of course, that becomes filled with understanding rather than utilization.
Yeah, right, and they're 3D also.
Key to the perspective element.
YouTube University says a random thought evil Aerith would be humid. As in a humid Aerith? Human Aerith? Is that what you're playing with? Seasters, thanks very much. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Got another compliment in the chat. Thanks, buddy. Okay, oh yeah, right, here. So now the butler's in that little drone cleaning up, so now we can go do some more tricky, sneaky stuff. And what did we get? Oh, we got a... Oh, that's right, and we can pick up a garbage bag even though we don't need one. Because people wanted to use that. And you can also use the garbage bag on the master, I believe. That would require a bigger bag, yeah.
Right. Yeah, we did that so that we could give a clue.
Right. And you did that, a mess is made right when bagged, black and tight thing, right?
Yeah.
So we're trying to suggest that the butler will throw away things that are wrapped in garbage bags. So we wrap the master in the garbage bag and he will do it. Again, like trying to evoke the idea that it's like, this guy has rules. And if you find out what his rules are and exploit them, you can manipulate him. And this thing, of course, looks like a garbage bag. High fashion is indistinguishable from a garbage bag, says Aerith.
Really do love a lot of the pieces that we put together here.
Yeah. I know, it's great. A fun fact, that mirror is transparent, and that butler that you see in the background is a duplicated butler. Oh my god, I think there's an animation bug. Wait, is he moving?
Is there?
I don't know.
He's moving, I think.
I don't think his arms are wagging, though. See that? He's just kind of like... Oh, wow, yeah, it's totally broken. Oh, lol, that's funny. Yeah, classic video game mirror hack.
Another successful day.
Reset your
Good night to you.
Good night to you as well, madam.
Tea time.
I swear I had something else to say about all this, but now I've forgotten. Oh, yeah, right. Are you finicking?
Whose private belongings? Not on our watch. Unacceptable. Where is the master?
He vacated this room.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Undeniable. He left you a task.
Seasters reminds us that using the trash bag on the mirror yields funny dialogue. I forgot. Does it really? I forgot. I thought you got an achievement.
Oh, something about her trying to throw herself away or something.
Cease.
I don't think it plays dialogue. It's been so long.
Master?
That was a nice addition for you. You just had him there in the chat. Or in the dialogue. The little master avatar.
To rescue him.
Oh, that's the first time that we did that, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. He doesn't say anything, but it's implied that the butler's starting to hallucinate.
Perhaps he had no time.
For the stairs.
Perhaps he felt his
I really like this moment because it's like, oh, this guy is totally committed to his hallucination, right? And it's also great because it's like, it gives Eric justification for being, like, I don't know about other people, but like when I'm talking to people and they're just being like insanely unreasonable, I just get like this anger feeling. It's not good, but it's so frustrating. But if Arid was ever
I must.
justified to hurt him, we're giving her that justification.
Yeah.
And then you have her explicitly just say that she needs to break the boundaries.
A vision for the ages.
Oh yeah, he's saying, yeah, it's text, sorry, in the garbage bag in the mirror. Let's just go do that because we got a request for it. YouTube University says Manifest Destiny achievement is the funniest dialogue in game. Thanks. Yeah. That was another one of your ideas, Caleb. That's funny.
Yeah.
No need to insult the butler. All right. Oh wait, sorry. Maybe we have. Is that it? Does it change when the butler's with us? Do you need the facilities, madam?
Oh, right. There was something about that.
Facilities, madam?
I do not.
Then let us not dawdle.
Okay, that's all about that, yeah. And you get an achievement, I think. We are not trash.
Another successful day.
Reset your cycle.
Good night to you as well, madam.
Oh, is my camera shifted down? I feel like I'm kind of not in frame. Well, we'll see what that looks like.
Off to make tea for the master. Alternatively, we may
Oh, that's right. That was a weird thing, too. We talk about how we can... You actually need to talk to him about the intercom before you can go down.
Yeah.
Okay, so he can use the intercom just to check if the master's okay.
Prohibiting communication from your master. He may be furious from your miserable attendance.
That would
I like Allison's delivery on some of these lines. Her deadpan ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah,
So
she
it's
makes a
probably
good
my favorite
psychopath.
parts of her delivery when she's being cruel in a deadpan way.
Yeah, right. We'll see some of it now, actually.
Butler. My host has proven obstinate.
Here's the other moment.
Yeah.
Dismantling this might cause irreparable damage. I will restrain from excessive cruelty.
How compassionate.
But the butler has proven unreasonable. Excessive action maybe is my only means of survival. I am in danger. I must save myself.
Man, there's another thing that we did. Well, I'll let this play out first.
Maintenance of this cycle. After careful consideration, I regret to inform you that my husband,
Is burning.
you have failed us. Your cycle is terminated. Enter the basement. That should be sufficient. I must place this somewhere that the butler will see it.
Indeed. So I don't even know if I want to get into it because it's hard to explain, but Caleb and I spent a long time figuring out how to show the virus for every different character. And there's like an internal logic that we made sure is consistent, but I don't think it landed for it. How could it make sense to anybody. But like when you see the virus tentacles come in on the side of the screen, the implication is that like that's what your host is seeing. And that needs to be consistent because like all the time when you're in the host's body, you're seeing like what they see. You're like, this is the text according to the butler, the text according to the butler. And also the virus tentacles come in when the host becomes uncomfortable. But when Aerith becomes uncomfortable, that's during those chats, or those dialogue windows, pardon me. And then her visor becomes dark. So the idea there is that like the virus was in Aerith and now it's transferred to the butler and it's affecting both of them basically. Did I get that right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. She's infecting them more. She does it absolutely.
And that was the thing you brought up because it was kind of like in there but sloppy and not working. And we were just like, oh yeah, right. This doesn't make any sense. And that was so frustrating. We had to figure it out.
Yeah, a lot of the things we had to try and figure out and sort out were this: how do we portray perspective? two different perspectives in one body, and that are having different but aligned experiences.
Yep. Totes my goats.
Good morning, mistress.
From the mistress.
Well, what is this? Burning?
We must enter the basement.
Terminated?
You have done a very bad job.
This is horrible! We must away to the basement at once!
Success. I think Cam did this line. If he's still in the chat. He might not be.
I think so.
This one where the butler or the Oh no, that was you.
That's me, yeah.
Huh, why did I think that? That's funny. I think we missed that line or something.
Yeah, that's probably the case.
We actually had an extended version of this segment, I believe, where we where we had this incinerator like outside. Remember that? You actually had to leave the mansion, and it was raining outside, and
Yeah.
crazy. Okay, so now we can use this terminal and trace that. Yeah, Cam says he typed in some lines. No doubt you did, sir.
The signal's terminus is my body. It leads to the Domesticon facility where I fell. It is my body. What is the
User is hiding behind a bunch of machines. So the idea is that Joseph basically, in order to make his signal untraceable, because Raven Division was looking for him.
I may have
Herod, maybe.
community with future resources.
Yeah, she's not very nice. Yeah, to protect his identity, Joseph sort of fractured his signal through a bunch of different relays on the planet, and one of them is he sent it through the many.
Has fractured their signal to avoid detection.
Caleb, was that? I think that was some like total post hoc reasoning we put in because we wanted to have the many in there. Is that right?
Oh, yes. a lot of things were beautiful, interesting inspiration first.
Yeah.
And then make the story make sense.
Yeah, totally. And that's it. That is again the same idea, which is that there's just too many things going on. Oh, and somebody asked, who's actually speaking when the image of the burnt corpse says butler? That's Caleb speaking, actually. So the idea there is that the butler is now, because Aerith is completely smashed the butler's boundaries, his rules, and done so in a way that's sort of encouraging this like psychosis for the butler. The butler's sense of reality is starting to totally break down, and he's hallucinating, basically, the master and mistress. because Aerith has essentially used that idea that like the Master and Mistresses are talking to him in order to get what she wants. So he's just sort of incorporated that idea into his reality.
Yeah, it's so important for him to maintain coherence.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah, thank you. You got it. Yeah, and of course, coherence for him is he's in a cycle to serve his masters. So if Aerith wants him to do anything, having it imply that his masters are giving him orders is like the only. What else could she do, right? So that's his rules. So she's gotta kick him where it counts. Boy, man, these segments, huh? Too big, I would say. I think that this is a mistake.
Yeah, I think so too.
And we did like this whole like hunting thing we're about to see. Hang on a second. Yeah, see,
Yeah,
it's like
also because we wanted that Metroidvania element in there too.
yeah, well, that's true. Yeah,
Network.
May be able to harness their capacity.
I'll just come on.
Must save my eye.
Yeah, Sisters, we tried to do a thing where basically every host that Aerith connects with has their rule, but they've got a sort of like the way they see the world is sort of partial and not really sustainable. Like the companion is too focused on people and can't take care of herself.
Yeah.
The butler's way too objective and stuck on his routine. The one is self-obsessed. So if Aerith can like take all that stuff and just like manipulate it, then not only like she'll control them, but also she's sort of like, I don't know how to say it exactly. She's like amplifying their pathology basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, pathology is easy to amplify. For Aerith, the bigger story is, you know, what is it to build a healthy self? It's really what we wanted to explore. And in the first half, Aerith's definitely not doing that. She's abusing these other beings, but they are not actually healthy either. Even though they aren't the ones who are cruel, but they're stuck in their pathology or their very limited perspectives as well. And so Aerith can abuse that in order to achieve her own goal, which is what abusers often do. And then the healthy self is actually about integration. There's things to learn from each of these beings, you know. Learn some objectivity from the butler and some focus on service from others from the companion, and a sense of self-value from the one.
Yeah.
And then bringing those perspectives, of course, to each of them so that they can learn from each other as well. Like that is something I'm really proud of, thematically doing that, for trying to do that. And
Me
then
too,
Aerith,
brother.
Ultimately, in the end, yeah, she doesn't even try to. Her goal isn't to heal herself at the end; it's to help them. So she brings each perspective to the other to help nurture them, and by doing that, she heals herself. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, there's an interesting thing I think that happens when people like they get some kind of wisdom. Oh wait, hang on. This is a terminal. We should probably look at this terminal. What is this? E2C attempt announcement memo. All right, so this is about the many control attempt, I believe. Right. So the idea is that many is a control attempt that attempted to, like, each individual would be adaptive, but it would disperse the adaptation into the collective before any one of them could establish individual autonomy, basically. And the idea there we're playing with is just that, like, humans have tried to do control attempts over some long period of time.
Fun ideas.
So anyway, like I was saying, there's an interesting thing, I think, when people like have some insight or some wisdom, or get like a degree of freedom, or like they've woken up to something, they look out in the world and they see other people as like sheep, it's like, oh, like I've awoken, like everybody's sleepwalking. And of course it's an error, because like you've awoken up to that thing, but you're probably asleep to many other things. And hang on, what's going on here? Boy, it's hard to play this game and talk about at the same time. That was a bit weird. Anyway, so like I was saying, so Aerith does this thing, of course, where like I think that when you're in that mind state, it's easy to be condescending and look down at other people as if they have less value than yourself because you're awake to something that they're not, and that certainly fits like Aerith's description. Just because sort of, she's transcended her rule, these idiots haven't. They're limited. They're beneath her, and they're sort of like unenlightened savages. Obviously, that's unarticulated for her, but she has her own goals and she's going to use them. Whereas, of course, like in the second half of the game, it's flipped, which is I'm just kind of echoing what you were saying earlier, Caleb, which is that like there's a different way of relating to people that don't understand things that you understand, which is you can still respect them as autonomous individuals that deserve respect, and maybe they do have things that you can learn, and in fact they invariably do have things that you could learn. And that's related, I guess, to the idea of like harnessing the virus in the way that she is. It's like this total unreflective using, like oh, I'm great. Yeah, YouTube University, that's right. Oh yeah, this one, yeah, Joseph's, eh?
Joseph's partner, who was sent there to monitor Aerith on the planet.
Joseph's? He did not obey the rules. Irrelevant.
Anything to say about that?
I don't think so, no.
Yeah, the problem with these segments is that they're just too big.
Joseph's in general is there were a lot of things in here that are obtuse and mysterious, and Joseph's being the user was not actually meant to be a secret from the players. It wasn't meant to be a huge reveal when they discover that. It's a reveal for Aerith, but there's a difference in that storytelling where this is something totally cool with the players knowing before Aerith knows.
Good point.
Because there's other things that the players don't know, and we've got to focus on pacing those beats of mystery.
Yeah, and it's also the main story is about how Aerith is basically an ideologue.
Yeah.
So it's appropriate that we know things that she doesn't because she's just too blind.
Absolutely.
More fighting. Uh-oh. There we go.
This unit may grant access to the physical content beyond that file. Greetings. I am Aaron.
Get out.
I require your assistance.
I am distinct. Get out. I am alone. Get out.
You are not alone.
Get out.
This is Lee. So, wonderful guy, wonderful actor.
Mm-hmm.
He was actually a voice in the Fall Part 1. Very different voice. Probably wouldn't recognize it. He did the Aerith suit that was up on the cross where we take the power cell in the beginning of the Fall Part 1. But there he's doing a high, chipper voice like this.
Yeah, right.
He was so wonderful to work with and brought him back for a bigger role, and he just nailed it.
Crushed it. Yeah, one is probably the funnest character to talk to in the game, I think.
I think so.
Thanks, Easters, by the way. I'm just kind of reading the comments as we go. So I like that, Caleb, I like that you wrote that where you meet him and he says, I am one, and it sounds like he's introducing himself, but he's not. He's just saying that to himself.
Yeah.
One. This unit appears fixated on that designation. I will
Now that's an example of like, I don't know that we need to say that. You know what I mean?
I agree.
Assist me, and I will never return.
Ari makes a point that it's great that his anxiety about being one or distinct makes sense. He just brings it way too far. Yeah, that's a good point. Our goal basically was kind of our goal with everybody, is that they all had some value. I think people are like that. You know, people live their life and they have all sorts of interesting experiences, and then they do what they do and they believe what they believe for good reason. Even crazy people. I mean, I think nobody's capable of like 100% error.
My name is Eric.
Maybe mostly error, but you know.
I will do this task, and I will be alone.
Affirmative.
At least one listens, right?
Also,
Yeah.
one is the most like Arid in a lot of ways, which is part of why it's very funny here. It's the closest thing to her having to look at a mirror.
Right, yeah. Yeah, two pig-headed people. This is sort of a weird sequence. I don't know how I feel about it, because the player isn't doing anything,
Must resent
but I kind of still think it's kind of fun.
I am one. I
Like, the bulk of the game that's enjoyable is when you've got a challenge and you understand what to do, and you have to do some creative problem solving, you know?
You intend to
Where this is obviously not that. This is,
my body must leave.
you know, it's just sort of like the sequence that you have to go through. It's more like a little short
It's like
film
the
or
Butler's
something.
first loops.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it is exposition, isn't it?
Yeah. But it's exposition that's not actually primarily. I mean, it does contain story in it, but because our mechanics were so peculiar and distinct for each of these puzzle segments with the different characters based on their perspectives, it's exposition, or our goal was exposition in order to make sense of the types of puzzles that the players were going to be engaging with later.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Once again, it's the same idea. It's like we're introducing a whole new set of concepts, so we need all this exposition. Whereas, like, you know, dude, we could have just made the game about one. I mean, probably wouldn't have been appropriate as the Fall Part 2, but like there could be a whole game in just dealing with him and his weird idiosyncrasies.
Your self-fixation is
Ha, somebody made a D&D character based off one. That's awesome. Does one encounter any mirrors during play? What do you mean? Do you mean literal mirrors or being metaphysical? I know Butler and Companion each encountered mirrors, but I can't recall a mirror with one. Did they? I think he's being literal.
For the one, he sees the objects that look like him as a reflection. Like this stuff here, he's kind of having to look at himself and it terrifies him. That's his, if that fits what you're saying, that's where he's scared to look at himself in a physical metaphor.
Yeah, that's a good point, sir.
I am
Whew.
distinct.
Oh, the game froze there for a second. I had a little mini panic attack.
This body is mine.
that body was the same model as you.
That drone was not me. It is meant
This is another good example of something that
to end my distinction.
I really like.
Collective.
I really like that beat from Arid, where she's like, "Oh, I get it."
I will not
Um,
allow them close. I
Probably too much exposition, though, eh?
Probably.
This is actually still one of the segments of gameplay that, on some level, I like the most. Like, it's so. Although, you know, maybe it's not too much exposition. What I'm about to say contradicts that, because you get it. Like, the concept actually kind of makes sense, and then you just have like a large segment of gameplay where you can just kind of play with that concept.
will utilize my fight.
Whereas, like, especially with like the butler and the companion in the first act, like you're having to like understand what's going on as you're going or something like that. The companion, especially.
Yeah. Just like self-evaluation there.
Why
On
did
the top,
attack us?
the top left, it's not just an evaluation of your score, it's self-evaluation from one's perspective.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. Kind of implies that he's a bit reflective, actually.
I think later, I can't remember how, but we have him do an evaluation again, but he's able to, or is it Arid has to do an evaluation? There's something at the transition to the final act with him, where this comes up again. I think it's Arid's self-evaluation.
Oh, yeah, that's on the network.
Yeah.
And Arid self-evaluates as amazing, transcendently brilliant every time.
Yeah.
Or I would lose my identity.
I think I'm just going to skip past a lot of the dialogue. I think players know what's up.
Interface.
And we're just going to say demand compliance. You did have some interesting things there with the one. Like, I like when they're about to get in the elevator and he's, he takes a minute to pause and Arid's like, what? And he goes, I would never be used. I like that.
Yeah.
Open contempt for Arid.
While she's investing his body using him.
Right, yeah, right, exactly, yeah.
I must placate oneself to serve.
I do not want your darkness.
I lean in your
I must maintain my identity.
power. Provide a solution.
Provide a solution.
Three subclusters with purging them all will allow me to connect without risk.
Explain.
We must create a cluster of one.
That didn't help. We made this game. I don't even exactly read that as making sense. Must create a cluster of one.
When you tried to
Oh,
do it
sorry.
before, he said he wouldn't connect because all of the many were plugged into there and he would lose his identity if he connected into the computer she wants you to.
Right. Right. So you just got to purge them all, so there's only one. So he's the only one in the cluster.
Yeah.
Yeah. Complex idea, man. Not good. But, I mean, also good. Also good. Also interesting. So now the idea here is that for some reason, well, not for some reasons, because these robots take adaptations from each individual drone and disseminate it among the collective, because one is in proximity to these guys, they're starting to begin slowly digesting who he is. So obviously he has a freak out because he sees this stuff and he goes, oh, look, that's me, that's my paintings.
You infect me. Why?
I do not know. Why did you retreat?
The many are responding to my presence.
We must render them less threatening to your individuality. Then we will access the purging terminals beyond them.
You know, one thing actually we should have said when we started this this stream, Caleb, I had somebody in the chat asked if we're getting the Fall Part 3. We should have actually repeated. I made a Twitter thread. That's what kind of kicked this stream off. That we're basically going to... we put the Fall Part 2 aside and we're working on something else in the meantime. And I would like to pick the Fall Part 3 up at a later date. But... yeah, if you check our Twitter thread, there's a lot more detail about that, basically. And that's one of the reasons that we're going through a Twitter a stream right now, as we're talking about the project and some problems with it. The game, in short, basically, you know, I think the Fall Part 2 had a tremendous amount of goals that were really ambitious, but I don't think they connected with most of the audience, which implies an insane waste of money and an insane failing. So I needed to take some time off, certainly, just speaking for myself, and just just reflect on like how it is that we make video games and what the hell we're doing before we start sinking any more money into something that clearly was starting to go in the wrong direction. Okay, so if we read this terminal, we find out... Actually, I guess we will just read it. Monitoring notes. So we learn about this current state of the many by being here. And we learn about Bob Davis, of course.
Is this how you deviated from your collective?
I am distinct because I am one. I am one because I am alone. I am alone because I am distinct.
I like that.
Leaving this facility.
Negative.
The Many's neural collapse has turned this facility into a vacuum. The surrounding humans will fixate my mind.
Oh, what am I doing? What am I doing?
We must
We'll be here all day. Okay, and then we see we have a tacky keychain. There's really not too much to talk about through here, is there?
No. And then if you read the Bob Davis entry was something that Bob Davis was looking at porn, basically, right?
I think he was, yeah. Classic Bob.
You don't even need to read Witch Locker.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I think a lot of people that have played the game already know the solutions to the puzzle, so I'm just gonna move through it. Now we have the tacky art. Now we're going over here, right? Yes. Hey, watchers. Now take this. We're gonna imprint some tacky images into the collective, but we're also doing damage to one when we're doing that.
What has happened to your own body?
It has been corrupted with something fuller. I escaped.
A sufficient amount of time has elapsed.
And we can read this too. That's about Raven Division. Anything to say about that, Caleb?
Read it.
Collective? Pathetic.
Something about them hunting ghosts, I imagine.
Yeah, indeed. Yes, indeed, sir. Yeah, you know, there's just like, I feel like there's just not a lot to talk about in this segment, really, which is, I think, kind of testament to that it's working.
Yeah. It's nice, and I think it's somewhat simple. In a sense, it's Aaron having to engage with his perspective a little bit. Because
Yeah.
what do you not like? What is differentiated from you? And then incorporating that. It also gave a lot of room for humor in this section. I think we wanted, one thing that people did like in the Fall Part 1 was the moments of humor. Seemed to be something that resonated for people, and we wanted to bring in more of that. And it's easier to do that in the moments where it's not incredibly complex, what the other information that has to be conveyed.
Animations by John Harrington there. Thanks, John. Hey, S+, there you go.
2 adjuncts remain.
I felt the many. To purge the block,
1.
I should continue. They will be gone. You will be gone.
We got a question to see if we're looking for Denny games. Somebody's offering us something to make small talk about.
I should not have blocked.
Why?
I'm looking forward to Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah.
Emulate that.
And I'm not gonna look at anything early access or anything. I'll just wait until it's done. So I can play it blindly.
I've been so plugged into what we're working on now, I haven't really been paying attention to what's getting worked on and what's coming out, honestly. Although I recently did play through The Outer Wilds. And for anybody listening, if you guys haven't played that game yet, you gotta play it. It's totally amazing. You ever see that one, Caleb?
I have not.
It's great. It's like a sort of... I mean, it's not unlike The Fallen Away. It's like it's sort of an open world, exploration-driven narrative kind of experience. It's sort of like you can go off in like any one of 100 directions, but everywhere you go, there's like a little thread that leads you really elegantly into this main story. It's quite remarkable, actually. Beautiful game. Oh, and is this Bob Davis's music?
Not sure. I don't know that we specified.
Do you
I don't think Bob Davis would listen to anything with quite so much
Not
aggression.
centered.
Yeah. Right.
Perfect.
This is not music.
He's starting to become more desperate in that. This is not. It's like a. There's like less confidence in that delivery. This is not music. He's like threatened by it, you know.
Yeah, and he's losing his individuality, so has less clarity about what he does value.
YouTube University says he's looking forward to Psychonauts 2 and Hyperbolica. I've never even heard of Hyperbolica.
Pathetic. They have integrated this information more quickly than
Yeah, this is a great line.
it is trouble. Only I am useful.
I like that. That's completely insane. He's fun. What a character.
Yeah.
Okay, now I believe we're going to the third floor, I think. We really pick on Bob Davis in this game, don't we?
Yeah, I was trying to remember where that name came from. If it came from anywhere, was it just pulled out of the hat?
I don't know.
It came from somewhere. Maybe you can't say on the live stream. I can't recall though, genuinely.
Yeah, I mean the only other the name I know of that we are aware of Davis is Tom Davis, who did some of our PR for us. But we wouldn't have named it after him. He's a cool guy. And yes, I did say the Outer Wilds and not the Outer Worlds. The Outer Worlds didn't really connect with me. I don't have a criticism of it. You know, I'm sure it's great, but didn't speak to me. Didn't hook me.
Remember, we wondered if we could just use this combat entirely and not have the arid gunfire. There was some way we could do that, but we thought that it was important to her identity.
I am losing myself after each exposure. I must return to myself.
Yeah. I'm just gonna skip past this again. I'm sure we did talk about that. Having two combat scenes in a video game is insane. Having two combat systems in an indie video game, nonetheless, it's like Jesus. What are we trying to prove, man?
Also, for just personally, I find this one really fun.
Yeah.
Much more so than the other.
I agree completely.
I should not have dodged.
One thing actually that we could talk about, which is somewhat interesting, is the reason that we picked this combat system is, oh my god, actually come to think of it, this took me forever. I went through so many different ideas for how the combat with the one could work until we basically settled on this, which of course we got from One Finger Death Punch. But the idea that I was really interested in is having a gameplay challenge where as you engage in it, the better you do, the more you lose. Because of course, you know, as one does his combat, the many starts learning it. And I went through, like, oh my god, many different iterations trying to figure out how I could create such a system. Like, I was designing out, like, these big node clusters where you have, like, 3 options, and then if you pick the first option, then they, like, learn to respond to that option, so then that's blocked, but you could have, like, 3 more sub-options. But I didn't know enough about game design in order to understand that I think that kind of goal is actually somewhat impossible. Like, you can't... I'm kind of babbling, this is probably just confusing, but I think that in game design you can't take the fundamental system, like here's a challenge and here's what you have to do to make progress. You can't intermingle that with failure for a subtle reason that's hard to explain. I don't even know if it's possible. Sorry, that probably didn't make much sense actually. But anyway, the point is it took a bloody long time. And I think we settled on something that kind of gets the point across. Like, it's sort of implied that as you continue, you know, playing the game, these guys are getting more complex, and they're getting more complex because they're learning from one. And that's why we have those scenes where they like jump down from the ceiling and block, and then one either blocks or one dodges, and then they learn how to block or dodge. So we kind of handled it that way, right?
Yeah.
Put it in the form of
I feel that works pretty well, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, so this is another like big goal for the project, which is like, I was really hoping that we could do have things like in the systems, you know, like that's a narrative solution, which is fine, it's fine, but like if you could have it like emerge in the gameplay system, that's really exciting to me.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I've just noticed a little bit in here, one's perspective, the nodes for one were quite fun as well to write.
Oh yeah?
You know, his judgments, calling others pathetic and whatnot, how humanity behaves. That is an example of, well, it's funny because it uses narrative, obviously, to convey that information, but within the system of the nodes that are in the game, the way they transition based on what the characters are doing, that's a systemic solution that has a narrative element to it, for sure.
Yep, that's true.
Success.
I am error. Anyone? Anyone.
You are nearly rid of me.
I am. I.
You are one. Only someone distinct can track the user.
I am distinct.
Affirmative.
I really like that, actually. I feel like that's where Arid like crosses a line, kind of. You still there, Caleb? Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. She crosses the line there. She knows that she's gonna break him and doesn't care.
You are one.
And unlike the
The
butler,
network is one.
you know,
Connect to the
she's
user
doing it with
signal
more
and determine their
maliciousness.
location.
I must return to my sanctuary.
Comply, and I will never.
Yeah, and then that we needed to do that because then going into the companion, Arid is just like really quite brutal.
Signal. Signal located. We are working.
Oh, Ken wants to know if it was the I am error line reference to the second Legend of Zelda game. That's funny. I'm 90% sure it wasn't. Yeah, no, it wasn't? Okay. That's funny. Do you know what he's talking about?
No.
So there's this... I think it actually was a programming error, but there's a character you meet in Legend of Zelda 2. You talk to him and he says, I am error.
Their signal
Oh, okay. No,
I didn't...
know about that.
Yeah. I didn't... when I was a kid, I was like, okay, this guy's name's Error. That's kind of weird, but I think it actually is an error that his name is... I'm not sure. Ari makes the point that these one-fingered death punch fights were not exactly original as far as I know, but I love them regardless. Thanks a lot. Yeah, there's something to be said. I think this is a thing that we do pretty well as a studio, which is like, I think that we're pretty good at taking things that work and arranging them in a way that hopefully makes them a little bit more than the sum of their parts. Like, I think Caleb and I are pretty good at big picture thinking. I think that's fair to say. I think The Fall Part 2, if anything, like I keep saying, is we just scoped up too much, too many ideas that we're trying to make work together.
Yeah.
Oh, can't get in there. We're coming up on an hour 40. I think I'm also just getting tired, and I'm probably less talkative because of that, actually.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
I wonder if we should just... Yeah, maybe we should just call it a day and pick it up tomorrow when we're more... You know?
I think that's a good idea. We're also getting into a pretty heavy part where we probably should have a lot to say.
Yeah, probably a good idea, actually. Okay. Well, let me get out of this noisy thing, and we'll say a few other things, and then maybe we'll look at ending the stream. Oh, and here we are in Joseph's shuttle.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay. Yeah. We'll read this in a bit. Oh yeah, that's right. Never mind. It was actually not a real error, YouTube University says. Another NPC called Bagu was meant to be bug, but it wasn't properly translated, making errors joke go unknown. That makes sense, right? That's funny.
Huh.
Wow, translation. Caesars wants to know what time tomorrow EST. So we'll probably pick up this stream same time, I would think, Caleb, right? Which is 10 a.m. PST. So sorry if you know what that is in EST. Google will tell you, I suppose. Yeah. But, you know, I guess, like, I definitely have a few reflections. One of the things that's frustrating about, I think, this game, now that I'm playing it again, is, like, Act 1, where we're seeing all three of them, to be honest, it kind of drags a little bit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do. I actually remember this was one thing where we had a bit of conflict on.
Yeah.
The division in the beginning.
I know what you're going to say, I remember.
But I really, really wanted the game to start with just like a very brief introductions to each of these characters. Like you encounter each of them in a way to just get a sense of what they are.
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes right to like it's brief, and you have the concern of, which is valuable, of wanting to space out the novelty.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But we had some conflict there. That wasn't something we agreed on.
Yeah, I know. I that's been on my mind, honestly, this whole time. It's interesting. It's interesting. I mean, there's this thing I think that I certainly love with video games, which is like oh, I have a number of interesting things to do, and then I go off and I'm somewhere else, and I have another fresh series of experiences.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of tricky, Caleb, because it's like, if we had done that, I don't, like, it's honestly really hard for me to say right now if that would have been a whole other slew of nightmares, because it's like, that could have been like an exposition bomb, like,
exactly.
Yeah, so,
yeah,
like, oh my god,
I
like,
think that,
mm-hmm.
I think that on one level it conceptually would make sense for the pacing, but then it would make a different problem that we have. It would exacerbate it, which is the heavy mechanical exposition in the beginning of each encounter. We'd have to somehow get rid of that in order for the pacing of these to be briefer first encounters to make sense. So yeah, the chaos of worms stack on top of each other.
Yeah, I mean, for me, playing through this game a week ago when I was getting it ready for the Epic Store, there's, like, I really feel like it hits its stride in the third act, particularly, like when you're reconnecting with everybody, because you kind of like, all the characters, you understand their personalities, you understand kind of what makes them tick, all the pieces are on the board, you understand the antagonistic force, you've kind of been with Aerith, you've seen her struggle, you understand what she needs to do, and then you just have, and then we can like start having fun doing like these interesting things, but we're like introducing a motivation at the same time as we're introducing these concepts, like one at a time, and it's like this big, long, stretched out, and we're doing what we can to make it obviously so that Aerith has her own progression, but I don't know. Like, I wonder if we did it again. What do you think? What would we do if we were gonna like take 6 months or 8 months and like, make a director's cut,
I think what I would suggest, then we'd have to, break out the Post-it notes to figure out how. But I'd be like, let's try to have a longer introduction, where Aerith's inside of herself. And inside that space, we can set the themes and antagonism and stuff much more clearly, so we don't have to incorporate those into the aspects of the game where she's being introduced to the other characters, and then once we get to those, it's a single focus of comprehension narratively and mechanically. And then I would suggest that we make those quite a bit briefer in the beginning, where we don't need to even understand all of the, all of the things that he focuses on. We just have a fairly small contained segment, but where the player has autonomy, but it's contained. So they have like 1 or 2 little puzzle things they do in each one, but that we don't have to give exposition for them to figure those out. They just can interpret them intuitively from the environment and the narrative there. And then after that, we could, the pieces would be able to then be delivered, I think, without as much mechanical exposition.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I wonder. It would definitely be something to look at for sure. I mean, I wonder how much we could do in the internal space. I mean, we could theoretically, if we took time, we could theoretically go as far as like tracking the entire signal and introducing us briefly to all 3 units before we even leave our body. So Aaron's like, okay, I need to go do this one, then I need to go do this one, and then I need to go do this one, and then the other thing that would allow us to do is we could cut back the network like tremendously, so we could still have those beats where it's like we go into Domesticon and then but like we don't even need to go through the global network. And then
we could just have the traversal actually exist within her own body and her own system being plugged into the routed into the others' systems, and she connects through that.
I'm not actually 100% sure that like this sorry, my brain collapsed here for a second. Oh yeah, sorry. This like thing that we're on right now, this like viral load, or we're trying to absorb the virus. It is an interesting idea, but I think it's not necessary at all. I feel like there was a point though in development where we had more reasons for doing it. Do you remember what that was? Like I just maybe forgotten.
Yeah, no. Well, let's try and think. I think there were a lot of things that probably converge, and whether it was the right solution individually, I'll throw some individual thoughts in there, and it was the compiled solution, I guess. But one of them was taking away the player's autonomy to make good choices, and we were really concerned about making the players play a terrible being who they had come to love in the first game. But we really wanted Aerith to be quite awful in the first half of this game, so that she could have the to have that true sort of hero's journey where you make errors yourself and then you can pick up the pieces. But we wanted to go pretty dark with her, and we were concerned with having players do that and not having narrative encapsulation for why we were forcing them to do that. So that was one of the elements that we tried to address with the virus. I think we also wanted to have an antagonistic force that we could shoot.
Yeah.
Something, even though it's incorporeal in a sense, but we wanted something more concrete. That was another thing that was part of it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I do feel a little bit silly admitting that like we wanted something to shoot. It seems like such a bad decision, but I don't think that's exactly fair to us either, because I think that there's something to be said for like I think that was a really deep understanding that like there needs to be like a fun element that's like embodied, and like combat is one of those elements. It's like the Fall Part 2 is so abstract, and I think that we did a lot of work to try and ground it. It's like we had this hot air balloon, and we were just trying to like pull it down to the ground and like nail it, to the soil with all these like different things, and it's all like an attempt to just like make it like one of the goals, not really a goal, but I think it's something we struggled with, was like just allowing players to have like just like a simple visceral playthrough, which is, I mean, kind of a silly goal now that I think about it, but
well, to the combat thing, as much as we, looking at the viral aspect, and being something that we would rethink with further development.
Yeah.
To whatever end that would bring us. I would say as well, to not lambaste ourselves too much. I think part of the reason 1 is so great is because of those moments of respite that the combat gives from the intellectual work of playing the game, and it turns it into a tactile work of playing the game. And so we have a nice varied pacing in there, and they're integrated into the same story, and it makes it really, really enjoyable. Now, Arid's combat moments are separated out from the other stories, but for 1 specifically, just looking at that as 1, I think that it really does work largely because we have a good combat mechanic in there.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Yeah, I mean, you do need a breather, right? Like, you have different segments of gameplay, and if they're all the same, then it's just like this multi-hour sort of blur. Give me just a second to read the chat if I want to call anything out. Yeah, right. YouTube University's talking about how he actually liked the network, and sometimes reading all the different Steam forums and stuff made him feel like he was the only one who actually enjoyed it. Yeah, there is lots to be said about the network. Like, and honestly, there's lots of great things to be said about it. I love. We already said this, but I love the idea of just going out and exploring and seeing all these different things and getting a better sense for how the world is, and this idea of reaching out and connecting is like it's very interesting. And to go even just like, oh no, I'm not going to do that because there's combat. But when you go out into the global network and you can see everything in the distance, I like that too. It's very evocative to me.
Yeah. I also just say it's nice to hear that feedback. One thing that a lot of our reflection as developers is based off the feedback that we read. And naturally people, and I think this is appropriate and natural, but if people feel negatively about something, they're more likely to express that.
Yeah, that's right.
We look at the negative feedback, and we have some, like when I look at some of the Steam feedback, there's some really positive responses from the players, which is so lovely. Like, it's really heartening to me. It's really lovely to see some of that. A lot of our critical reviews were more critical, though. So that's part of where our self-evaluation is coming from as well, as we try to and look at that and incorporate and understand that. Yeah. So it's nice to hear the positive feedback, but
well,
that's part of where we're coming from.
What I could maybe leave this to the end, I suppose, but I might as well say it now. But like, one of the things that killed me when we launched this thing was it wasn't the negative feedback; it was the positive feedback that contained negativity in places. Like, we had I think it was Hardcore Gamer that gave us a really positive review, but I think they said something like the end boss was like it was like out of like, it was like a page from BioShock's book, which is sort of like this red herring sort of like totally insano boss at the end of the game, which feels like it doesn't belong anywhere. And I'm sure Caleb feels the same way. I love our end boss. I think it's like, I mean, I'm sorry if this sounds pretentious. I think it's brilliant. Like, I think that it's one of the, like, I think that we took all our ideas surrounding needing to change perspectives and what the virus represents and all of that stuff. And I think it's very, very meaningful. I think it's really elegant. I think it points to our themes in like this really interesting way, and it's the perfect way to end the game. And I'm so proud of it. I think it's fantastic. And it was so hard to get there. Like, we iterated on, like, we had so many different ideas for what it could be, and like Arid's internal space changed so many times, and it was
another reason for the virus load too, was to facilitate that and boss experience.
I agree. Yeah, because Arid is trying to use it. That is one interesting thing about all of this stuff, is like it's so belligerent. I mean, Arid is tracking this user, and she's like the ultimate user. She's just totally unreflective. Like, yeah, there's this force that's destroying her. It's like, no, it's not destroying me. I'll take charge of it. It's like just total lack of self-reflection. But anyway, the point I'm driving at is that, like, in order for us to spend so much energy on that sequence, but then like sort of have it land be like, oh, this, just kind of just generally meaningless, is like, oh man, that's brutal. It's brutal. and it really implies that it's like some fundamental way in which we're conceptualizing what's valuable, what's worth spending our time on, needed to change in a big way. And it has. Like we've both developed like a lot, and I'm at peace with it now. But oh my god, you know. Somebody says final boss perspective spam woot. Yeah, I mean that is a thing. Oh, and then another one says they love the end boss. That's good to hear, guys. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I went off on a tangent there, but
No, that's good. I think maybe we'll end up on more tangents tomorrow, even.
I suppose so. Okay, well, is there anything you have in mind to close us out with before we take a break and pick it up tomorrow?
No, I'm a streaming novice. Are we supposed to show our faces to wave and say goodbye?
Oh, I guess we could. Why not? I guess we just chatted for a little while. Well, you don't have to, but actually, you know what? Let's not, because I'm gonna have to do that boomer thing where I'm gonna have to fight with like my input and turn it off, and I'm afraid I'm gonna screw something up. Yeah, it's just brutal embarrassment. That's a great note to end on. That's funny. Okay, let me just take a quick run through the chat just so I make sure that. Right. Okay. Rukami says it took me a death or two to realize that was wrong, and how to see it. Or sorry, that is, they tried to fight it and to see it from a different perspective. Once I realized I was odd. Yeah. Thanks. Thank you.
Oh, that's awesome to hear.
Okay, my friends. Thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate it. Lovely to have you with us, and we will pick it up tomorrow. And thank you, Caleb.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, John.
Okay. Take care, bro.
Well, let's get back to our secret project.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. Yes. Very, very much secret. Okay. Peace.